What up, what up? I'm back at it again with another video. Before I get into the video, please give this video a thumbs up. I'm trying to get this video to 100 likes, so every like counts. Help me get this video to 100 likes. For today's video, I'm going to be answering the question, do our parents need therapy? All of you know that on this channel I talk a lot about mental wellness and emotional intelligence and all sorts of things, and I actually made a video about the pros and cons of going to therapy, which I really recommend you watch. But this topic is a bit sensitive and I definitely recognize that. So first of all, I want to say, if your parents manipulate you, abuse you, become volatile, have addiction issues, etc., you may need to set boundaries with them. You may need to have a lot of distance between yourself and them. You may need to cut them out of your life completely, because there's this idea that, oh, like therapy can just fix everybody. Everybody is broken, or a lot of people are broken, and therapy will just fix people. I don't agree. Actually, no. So let's talk about the different types of therapy. There's CBT, there's DBT, there are support groups, there's art therapy, there's drama therapy, there's EMDR, there's attachment-based theory therapy, there's narrative therapy, there's somatic experiencing, there is sand tray therapy. There's so many different kinds of therapy. When we're saying that our parents need to go to therapy, we're talking about talk therapy. You sit down, you talk to a therapist in a chair like this, and you talk about your stuff. Over the last few years, I've really moved away from saying that people need therapy, and that this is something that I used to say when I was first starting my therapy journey back in 2012. It's wild. It's almost been like a 10-year thing at this point. When I found therapy, for me, it was something that was so amazing and empowering, and I felt like I was growing so much and engaging with the world in a completely different way, having different experiences and perspectives. And so for me, it was something that was amazing and wonderful and beautiful. But that is not the same experience that everybody else has. And also, that was on my fourth therapist. So therapist 1, 2, 3, those weren't the experiences that I had. That was on my fourth therapist. Who has the time? Who has the emotional energy? Who has the money? Who has the resources, especially when you are down and out and depressed, to search through and try out 4 different therapists? Not a lot of people. So anyway, it worked for me. I think therapy would likely benefit our parents. They would learn different tools and they would learn different perspectives, but that's if they went willingly. That's if they recognize within themselves, like, I keep hitting the same walls in terms of communication, in terms of like life circumstances. I keep hitting a certain wall. I'm not quite satisfied, and I recognize that there has to be something that maybe I'm contributing to the situation that maybe plays a part into why things are this way. But that takes an incredible amount of self-awareness, humility, strength, and not all of our parents have that. Forcing someone to go to therapy is not good. You won't get a lot out of therapy if somebody forces you to go, and it's not something that you realize that you want to go and get something from. Let me keep it real. Like, our parents have been able to get through their entire lives. Like, my parents are in their 60s. They were able to hold down jobs. They were able to hold down either apartments or houses. They were able to get into marriages or relationships, and whether they worked out or not, they were able to have these things that society says, if you have these things, you are a functioning adult. They have those things. They have a car, or maybe they don't have a car, but they have a way to get around, or they figured out a way to maneuver this world and make it their own. And so if society is saying like, oh yeah, like this is what a person your age should have, and you kind of have like a lot of those things, then it's kind of like, I'm good. I don't need therapy. Therapy is for those kind of people who can't hold down a job or who can't do XYZ, right? And so that's where a lot of that societal stigma comes in around therapy. And we also have to recognize like therapy is like a generational thing. So like our generation, a lot of us are aware of what therapy is and are aware of some of the benefits that can come with being in therapy, but like at the same time it's still stigmatized. I've been talking about therapy and mental wellness on this channel since 2014. In the early days, that was not a trending topic. That was not something that you saw on TV. Mental wellness was not something that was mentioned on your MTVs and your BETs and your network television in the way that it is now. It is front and center now. And let me tell you, it was a lonely place on YouTube in 2014 2014, 2015, 2016, talking about mental wellness and emotional intelligence. It was a very lonely place. There were a couple of creators who I kind of like watched their content and looked up to in certain regards. A lot of this stuff is incredibly painful, rehashing these old wounds and these deep traumas, and also recognizing the ways that because of your own stuff, you've now hurt other people and you've now brought that stuff into other people's lives. That is not something that is easy to contend with. That is very painful. And a lot of our parents have coped by just pretending like they don't exist. To be fair, there wasn't room for our parents to properly address this stuff and properly grieve. Specifically Black people, specifically in this country. Even now, I tweet about this all the time, about how just the difference in the way a white person living with mental illness is received and understood and supported is radically different from the ways a Black person living with mental illness is received and understood. If we think it's bad for us, think about the generation before us. Think about the generation before them. This is not something that they were allowed to be. And when you talk about some of the cons of therapy, right? We cannot skirt away from the racist history and also ongoing institutionalization of Black people. If a Black person was thought to be mentally ill or crazy not too long ago, they would be institutionalized. They would be experimented on. These are byproducts of slavery. Black people are still not seen as quite human and capable of like a wide range of emotions. So this is getting into like medical racism, and that's a whole rabbit hole, right? But I do want to acknowledge that, yeah, like that was like a societal thing. You had to get it together. You could not be seen as weak. You could not be weak or vulnerable. You could not be mentally ill. You could not be seen in that way. Learning that has helped me get more context about my parents. And even though my parents are from Nigeria, that country was colonized by England and only very recently got its independence. So a lot of these colonial attitudes and the devaluing of Black life is still very active and very present, and this idea of mental illness is still very, very, very stigmatized and taboo. That doesn't just go away when you are forced to immigrate to another country. Kind of what I'm getting at within this whole video is that you can't really change other people. You can change yourself and how you see situations and the dynamics of relationships, and that is something that I encourage you to do. And it's really hard and really sad and heartbreaking, because like teaching your parents things like boundaries, healthy boundaries, and teaching your parents things like how to show affection and show love, that is an incredibly painful experience. A lot of children don't feel like we should be the ones that have to teach our parents those things, that they should have been the ones to teach us these things. I also want to say that the dynamics in your family may have to shift. You may have to really remove yourself. You may have to change the way that you come around, and maybe you don't come around at all. Maybe you only take their calls once every 2 weeks, or once a month, or never. Those are options too. If you do have parents who are like more involved in your lives and you really do care about them and you don't want to take this distance and stuff, you might experience like a lot of pain. If I'm being real, you might experience a lot of anguish because you really see the potential that is there. If they would just tweak this, if they would just change this. And I'm just letting you know, like you can't force people to change unless they want to change. Does this idea that our parents need therapy, does this come from you as a person who is in therapy and is doing the work, and you're coming at it from like a place of judgment? Like, oh, I'm doing the work, you're not doing the work. Is this coming from you as a person who has never gone to therapy and you're like, oh, surely you need to go. You need to go. And it's kind of like, I don't know, like I feel like it's hard. It's really, really hard, because it's like we have these ideas of what we think our parents should be and should have been for us. A lot of us have been abused and have been neglected, have had our rights violated. Our parents have not seen us as our own individual human beings, but just like an extension of themselves, or just like property, or just whatever. Like, oh, like I could just cross your boundaries or just do whatever, you're my child. And like I said, like a lot of that is very, very harmful, and it's very, very abusive. I don't really know how to get people who do not see this as a viable option to see it as something for them. What I've done is I have sent along like this therapist. Her name is Dr. Tama. She's like an older woman and she's Black. And so I've sent that along to older people in my life who I think might benefit from hearing some of her stuff. She is also a minister. And so I know that that might be attractive to a lot of people who are older, who are religious, who are Christian or something like that. So, I mean, that might be an option too. Like there are tons of like podcasts and YouTube channels made by therapists, made by mental health professionals. And it's not therapy, but it's like dipping your feet in. That is something that you can possibly do for older people. Give them a person who looks like them, who is in their age group, who is talking about mental wellness. And so that might like destigmatize it a little bit. That might make it a bit more comfortable or a bit easier to broach this topic for them. Another thing is therapy is not this end all be all. I made a thread about this on Twitter. I will link it down below. And for some people, actually therapy can make things worse. A lot of people with eating disorders talk about therapy actually making things worse because a lot of therapists are not equipped to help people with eating disorders. There are also neurodivergent people who actually therapy like CBT, talk therapy, and even DBT to an extent. It doesn't do anything. It's like, okay, like, all right, you know, we've talked it out. I've talked about my childhood trauma. Okay, great. Can I have some meds? Like, that's what I need. Like, that's what some people need. Some people need medication. Some people do not need therapy, or it would not be beneficial for them. Another thing is like with abusers, serial abusers. They go to therapy. And this has been proven. They go to therapy, they adopt therapy language, and they learn new ways to manipulate people. So they manipulate therapists and get them on their side to see them as the victim. And now they have all of this language. They have this therapy language to manipulate people to appear and present themselves with an even shinier exterior. And now you're looking at a person and you're like, wow, they're so emotionally intelligent. And then you get a little closer and it's like, whoa, this is abuse. And they have words and techniques to disarm you that they learned in therapy. This idea that we should all be in therapy, it kind of sometimes comes off a little carceral as well. Like, yeah, you need to go to therapy. And like, it's a punishment, like for bad behavior. I personally am trying to move away from this idea of like, when somebody does something wrong, punishment. That's what we've always done as a society. It's actually multiplying violence. I'm looking at other ways of addressing harm created in my relationships and in my communities. So yeah, once again, what works for you is not going to work for everybody. What works for you is not what everybody should be doing. You can lead by example. You can go, you can do the work, and then you can start to shift in your relationships and your family dynamics and apply boundaries. Just because you went to therapy does not make you equipped to be a therapist, especially not for your family dynamic. It does not mean that you are now supposed to shoulder everybody else's burdens or fix people in your family with what you learned in therapy. That is like really unethical, and it's just not gonna work because you don't really know what you're doing. You might think you know what you're doing, but you don't know what you're doing. So yeah, you can lead by example and also with boundaries. That's really what you can do. Acceptance is hard. Acceptance that my parents will never go to therapy. Never. And they will likely continue on in their own habits until they are not here anymore. And that is a really, really tough pill to swallow. But I just kind of wonder if we can love them and love ourselves at the distance that we need to love. Support them in a way does not expose us to their harmful beliefs and patterns, words, actions. So that means there's gonna have to be boundaries. That's kind of it, you know? That's all you could do. If you made it this far, please leave me some hearts down in the comment section below and let me know what you liked about this video. I was actually thinking of doing a pros and cons of going to therapy part 2. I don't know, let me know if that is something that you would like to see in the comment section below. And I will see you next time. Peace.